I can see your mouth move and hear your voice at the same time. It's synced up.
Oh, weird. That's strange.
Welcome to Pros Talking Prose. Today, Troy and I are going to talk craft. We've been talking business quite a bit.
And we're not talking about the little orange singles that you get from your mom.
Not the macaroni and cheese.
Mayonnaise versus salad dressing.
Right.
No,
I like
none of that.
Yeah,
none of that.
I prefer the mac and cheese. Kraft mac and cheese makes the best powdered cheese that I've ever tasted in my entire life. But we're not talking about those kinds of days. We're talking about the craft
not that kind of
writing.
craft.
Not that kind. So yeah, that's what we're going to talk about today. So what Troy and I have kind of been bouncing around between the two of us is let's start at the beginning. How do you take an idea and make it become a viable product, a product that not just necessarily, we're not talking about like the actual creation of a physical book. We're talking about actually making the idea a viable story that people will want to be invested in emotionally and want to pay you money to buy. So we want to talk about how to make like that idea become a story that is going to be something that people want to invest their time and money in. So Troy has been long thought of as the plot doctor, and I have leaned on Troy for a lot of time, a lot of craft, craft ideas and things like that. So because he's just good at it. He just sees the story naturally. And I like to think I do too, but he has got many more years in this process and he's written way more than I have. So he kind of understands like how that actually works better for a writer. So I'm going to lean on him quite a bit today, but I do have kind of an outline to keep us on track. And I guess the very first thing that we want to make sure that we do is like I said earlier, Troy, let's test the idea to see if it is in fact something that we should continue to work with. Sometimes right. And I'm just going to preface this with that whole age old, like I have an author that approached me and says, I have this really great story. And then you ask them to tell you about their story. And usually it's just this happened and then this happened and then this happened and then this happened. And there's no real, while that's kind of interesting sometimes, because things that happen to us are interesting, that's not what actually drives a story, right? Like what we're investing in right. with when we read for pleasure is we're investing in, why do I care if this person is going through this and then this right. and then this and then this? So there's some pressure tests that we can kind of like ask ourselves about things, right? So what are some things that you maybe would say, okay, is this a good enough idea to kind of go forward with? Like, do you have anything that you kind of like use as kind of just a rule of thumb? I know some of this is very instinctual, huh?
Right, and it is kind of instinctual, and I actually I've taught classes, and I should really like develop into more of a course of developing an innate sense of story, because some people have that naturally as a talent. And some people, you can develop it though. You can very intentionally develop an innate sense of story, which helps you to understand if an idea is enough or is viable enough for a story. But one of the biggest things I look at first is this a series of cool events, or is there someone that I have in mind that this is happening to? So like, for instance, my book Stray Ally, like, the first part of it came to me in a dream at 2 a.m. Like I sat up out of bed and wrote it down, because basically what had happened in my dream was I'm driving along the freeway on the way into Boise, and a body falls off of the overpass and lands on the guy's windshield.
Jeez. Okay.
Okay. That's the start of the story. Okay. So good start to a story, right? Because that's interrupting your ordinary world. I'm driving to work, drinking my coffee, and a body lands on my windshield. Bad thing that happened, right?
Right.
But the question is, who does it happen to, and how does that impact their life? Because
Right.
it's going to impact everybody's life differently, right? And kind of like we talk about when we talk about Lisa Cron and the story genius, and we'll probably mention that again. And I mention it a lot because the reason
Yeah.
is your
It
character comes
works.
into this with a backstory. So if this is a paramedic, they might react entirely differently than Joe Schmo banker who has never seen a dead body in his life,
Right.
right? So there's a different way that people react. So I almost immediately ask, who is this happening to, and how is it going to impact their lives? Because also the extent of the impact tells you how big of a story it is. If the impact isn't big enough, it's just a short story, you know, and
Hmm.
that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But if it's a huge impact, I mean, which imagining you could go either way with that. This could be a short story with a quick impact, body landed on my windshield. I did something about it, story's over, right? Or body landed on my windshield and that body means something way more than just a body landing on my windshield. And it launches me into this mystery or investigation or whatever else happens after that.
Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah.
I think that's one of your first tests is like, if this happened to somebody, this person I have in mind, where would we go from there? Like, where does it
Right.
go from there?
That
So,
is a good test. We've synced
we're
up,
back.
Troy. Okay, so you were
Yes.
saying that you have that kind of like instinctual test to be able to see where the story is as it applies to a person. Like if this happens to this person, where will it take them, right? So then oh,
Right.
not I'm lost my notes because I was looking at furniture while I was waiting for you. Um so my like the first thing that I have like here is a pressure test. Like, can this thing generate a sustained conflict? So that is one of the things that you always talk about, Troy, is like whether or not there is
Mhm.
conflict, because conflict drives story, right? Like you have to have conflict. It's I always liken it to like the Matrix when Agent Smith is trying to interrogate Morpheus, and he talks about how they created another Matrix, but it didn't work because it was too idealistic and too utopian and people, and like it was perfect and the people rejected it, right? So they had to create this conflict, and it disgusted Agent Smith that they required this conflict. He thinks that humans are disgusting, but it is totally true, right? We actually crave conflict. It's really, really wild that we do this as humans, but it's basically because it's the conflict that kind of creates the mechanism that makes us change, and often in story for the better,
Mhm.
right? And so
Right.
you have to ask yourself, what force is pushing against this idea? Like, who's being harmed, who's threatened, who's being changed because of this? If we go with Troy's idea about the body falling on the car, and it's a paramedic who hates the sight of blood, or like like something like
Yeah.
there
Something like
you've
that.
got some
Yeah.
conflict. You're like, all of a sudden he's forced to be into this like situation where he's like, there's no choice. He's faced with the situation right there. Like there's conflict, right? So the other thing that drives story that is very, very important that people, and this is the thing that, like, again, longevity, right? You have to ask yourself, can this opposition or can this conflict last? Like, and that I think is like one of the biggest things that you run into, Troy, like with story plot and helping
Mhm.
people through plot issues, is that they've got a conflict, but the conflict isn't complex enough to last the entire novel.
Well, or the other thing that I've run into just recently is that it's not specific enough. So
Right.
authors have this idea that keeping things vague keeps the reader guessing. The problem with that is when I don't have anything concrete to be afraid of, and I don't have anything concrete that is causing conflict, then all that's causing conflict is confusion. Well, we
Hmm.
don't come to stories to be confused. We come to stories for clarity. Because story, so as I often say, story is how we learn to interact with the world and society around us. That's just your parents will tell you the story of the boogeyman so that you stay in bed, right? Because
Right,
you're afraid of
right.
the thing under the bed. You're not going to get out because it's going to grab you. And so, and then your parents are terribly upset when you pee the bed because I'm not getting out of that bed.
Conflict.
You know, I mean, conflict, right? Conflict. But your parents are creating a conflict in your mind with a story that compels you to go a certain direction and make certain choices that they want you to make,
Right.
right? The story of Santa Claus is so that you will behave at least 2 months a year because you're afraid that Santa's going to put you on the naughty list and you're
Oh,
gonna get cold, right? But it's all a story, but that story creates two things. It creates internal and external conflict,
right,
right? Because it creates conflict with your behavior, but also creates in your mind every time you go to make a decision, there's a conflict there between the good and the bad, you know. And
right.
hey, someone's watching me, and that's kind of the external pressure. And so
That's
it's
why
really when you do the pressure test, it's two.
Krampus is much a
Right. Oh yeah.
stronger than, than Santa
Is much
Claus.
stronger deterrent. It is, even though it's scary, because the thing is, okay, so two things. First of all, you have to have internal and external conflict. If it's just
Right,
external conflict, it's just a series of events, and that's cool because we'll all watch a UFC fight. But a lot of times when you're watching a UFC fight and it gets really good, is because one of the guys is hurt
right,
really bad and he's trying to push through it, right? So it's that also that internal strength and conflict,
right,
right? So internal and external conflict, both. But the other part of it is that it has to be severe enough to create movement or create
right,
decision making.
right.
So it has to force your characters into a choice.
That's
So,
my second test actually is as a choice.
yes,
Yeah. Yeah. So the
does it
choice
create
test.
choices? And in the case of a novel, it has to create choices multiple,
Multiple.
right? Because a short story we can base on one choice, maybe two choices, right? Something like that. But in a novel, there's going to need to be a series of choices made that impacts the character, right?
Right,
So does it force a choice? If it doesn't force a choice, it may even be a really cool idea. And maybe it is just one of, because for instance, the idea of the body landing on the guy's windshield, okay, that technically is actually a small idea. It's the spark of the story. The
right,
real story is the big idea of what happens as a result of that, right?
right.
So the small idea sparked the big idea. And sometimes it's the other way around. The big ideas spark the small ideas. So at some point, you have to break that idea apart and go, are there other small ideas and small decisions and decisions that happen in the scope of this big idea? If there's not enough of those, it's not big enough for a novel. Maybe it's a short story, maybe it's a novella, but it's not big enough for a long novel because
Right,
there's just not enough choice that it forces your characters to do. And it gets boring. And what you were talking about is like if those things are vague, then what happens is the middle of your story sags because we can only take vague things for so long. We need to have concrete events and concrete negative things. But authors get this thing of, well, I don't want to hurt my main character. No, no. Put them up in a tree, throw rocks at them, and see what happens. You
right,
know,
right.
eventually they got to fall.
Well, the thing about the
So,
choices
you
too is I
know,
think that they actually have to challenge the character of the character. You know what I mean? Like
mhm.
you have to have that protagonist be pushed to the limits of their values. And I think that's what actually really makes stories stronger. I'm reading a really fun murder mystery right now, and he's a Swiss author. He's actually a best-selling author in Switzerland, and then this has been translated into the US. And I really think the translation has done a good job at capturing like the humor, because of course culturally there's different humor types and like
Mhm.
things like that. But like they've done a good job with this translation. But the thing is that's interesting about it is it's very much this author. He's staying at a hotel because he's trying to escape for a second. You know, he's had a bad breakup or whatever. He meets another woman who is there for her own reasons too. And for some reason, she finds out he's a writer, which, I mean, raise your hand if you've ever had this happen. When somebody finds out you're a writer, they're like, oh my gosh, let me ask you 14 million questions. How do you become a writer? I've always thought about being a writer. So this is happening to him, right? As per usual. But instead of him, like, he tries to dismiss her in a very easy way by saying, you know, if you have an idea, it needs to have a strong, like, motivation, right, for the reader.
Mm-hmm.
And he brings up questions. He says, you need to ask your characters questions, or ask more questions about questions about questions. And the more questions you make, then more you can ask, the better your story is going to be. And he's the inciting incident of this novel was basically, he asked the question, like, this hotel we're staying in, there's a 321 and a half room and there's a 323. Where's 322? What happened to that room 322? Why do they not call
Right.
it 322?
Why do they not call it that?
And he's like, I understand room 13. Sometimes people they'll skip over 13 because people are superstitious. But in this case, it's 322. Weird. And so she's like, well, let's go find out. So they go to the, like, bellboy, and they kind of go down this, and it ends up being a murder mystery because that somebody was murdered in room 322, but they had to dig to find that out. It's what the value it's forcing this author to do, the questions that drive this author, is he's like, almost like, I don't have time for this, but this woman is pushing him to become a better writer because she's asking now the questions that he told her to ask herself. And it's really kind of, and it drives him, right? And it's moving him forward. So his values are changing a little bit because he's coming back to this world of, like, loving writing. Like, he's like, oh, this isn't a chore, it's actually fun to do this. So you know, the choice test is good. Like, does this make meaningful decisions, and are these decisions going to affect the author's value, or not the author, but the character's value systems? And that again is it gives the reader an investment or a reason why they want to follow this character. You need to have that, otherwise your readers are going to not give a crap.
Well, and that's part of, like, what we were talking about before, is your characters need to have clear goals and motives, and concrete goals and motives that they can chase after. And one of the mistakes that beginning authors make is they don't give the main character that from the very beginning.
Right.
Like, we often say, so the theme usually gets stated somewhere in the story before the inciting
incident. Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't have to, but sometimes it can be overtly stated by the character. You know, the first line of A Prayer for Owen Meany by John Irving, it's like the guy basically says, you know, I'm a Christian because of Owen Meany, but it's not because he killed my mom. It's not because of his ruined voice. And you're like, you outlined the whole story in the first two sentences, right? And the theme of the story is very, very clear, right? And it's in the first paragraph. So immediately I'm like, wait, he killed his mother. There's just instant questions. And I'm like, I want the answers to this, you know? And so that often happens with some of the best books that we know, is within that first chapter, we know exactly what the character wants. We know exactly what they're after. We know what their motives are, you know, all of that type of thing. So I think it's really, really important that you have that in mind as the author. Even if you're a discovery writer and you don't know anything else, if you know that premise and that idea and what your character wants and what they need, then you can send them on a journey chasing after that.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
And then your reader is along for the ride.
So, you know, a couple of red flags to know if you're off track is to ask yourself if things are just happening to the character. One of the things that I've noticed, because this builds on that whole choice thing, is a lot of times authors, like I said, they'll come to me and they'll say, this happened, and then this happened to this person, and then this happened to this person. And you're kind of like, oh my gosh, but you're not in the real nook and cranny of a story. You're not really gonna capture your reader unless you're giving them the main character, a reason to go through that plot. People that are just letting life happen to them, They're not living interesting lives.
Well, right, because so let's take a mystery for instance. Okay, so halfway through a mystery, usually what happens in a mystery is the first half of the mystery, your detective is reacting to things that come at them. Something
Mm-hmm.
comes at them and it causes a reaction in them.
Right.
Now, but part of that is even in those early stages, when something is happening to your detective, they need to have a motive to react the way that they react, because
Right.
usually the way they react is curiosity and moving towards the mystery instead of away from it. But normal people, like, and so I'm not a normal person in this way. If I see an
Me
auto
neither.
accident, I pull over my car and I run towards it to see if I can help somebody.
Right.
People who are what we call runner inners are generally don't live as long as people that are passerbys and
Mm-hmm.
observers. And the reason is we put ourselves in danger more often. It's just plain and simple. That's the rule, right? But
Mm-hmm.
your characters typically will move towards the danger, but they have a reason for
They have a
doing
really
that.
good reason why. Yeah.
And then at the halfway point of the story, though, the detective or your character becomes proactive and they start chasing something. So
Mm-hmm.
they're no longer reacting to what's happening. Now they're chasing the solution.
Right.
Okay. Those things are that transition and that change is really super important because their motive does not change, but what they're doing related to their motive changes.
Right.
But they still have that motive from the very beginning. The detective is going to solve that case. And at some point, typically that case becomes personal. And as soon as it becomes personal, they are not going to give up until they solve it,
Right.
right? Because that's what provides you with a strong motive. But if your character, if the story never becomes personal to them, then we go, why did that character do that thing that way? And
Yeah.
as soon as your reader starts questioning that because it doesn't make sense,
Mm-hmm.
that's when you lose them in your story. And that's why we often say that the difference between fiction and real life is fiction has to make more sense.
That's
Because
true.
people do things and their motives are very clouded in real life, and you go, what in the world is
Yeah.
that
But
person
in books,
thinking?
they need to be clear.
But in books, it has to be clearer. So we need
Mm-hmm.
clarity. We need concrete things. The vague things will only take us so far, and vague motives never result in a driving story that just draws people through
Yeah.
because we don't believe that people would do that for that reason. We know
Right.
we need motive to do things, right? Otherwise, I'm just going to sit on the couch all day. So I need some kind of a motive. Well, okay, give your characters a motive,
Right.
something that's personal. And that personal motive is what'll drag them and your reader through the story. It also drags you through the story so you don't get writer's block because you want to know what happens next.
Exactly.
So,
Well, I mean, another red flag would be is if your character, your main character or protagonist is solving the problem with no personal cost. If it's just a
oh,
regular, like if it's just like they don't lose anything by going through what you're
hmm
just putting them through. Nothing, if nothing changed, if that character did not change in any way, shape, or form, or there was no price that they had to pay to get through that, then again, the stakes are not high enough. Things are not con- conflicted enough. You're not creating enough in your story. So that's
right,
another red flag.
exactly, exactly. The thing is the story must create movement. It must escalate, and each time it escalates, that must cost your character or your characters something. The more it costs them, the better your story. And again, that's because the conflict just needs to get harder and harder. Almost every story has a dark night. And I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I talk about the one in Hunger Games a lot, right?
Yeah, that's because it's
Um,
easy. I mean, it's so
yeah,
obvious.
yeah. Because I mean, Katniss is finally, she's got someone on her side. And then what is that girl's name? Rue is
Rue dies.
killed.
Mm-hmm.
She dies,
And it
right?
reminds her of
And
her sister.
yeah, it reminds her of her
The
sister
whole reason she's there is to save her sister, right?
is to save her sister. So she's had this victory, right? They had this victory. They blew up the thing. All the, rich kids were using this thing. They're like, we'll just blow up the supply. I'm like, yeah. Oh, crap.
Yeah.
Rue's dead. And so she has this great, what she thinks is a victory, what she thinks is a breakthrough, and boom, death brings her down to a dark moment where she has to say, where am I? And why am I
Why am I
here?
even
And then
here?
she says, where's PETA?
Yeah.
And that instantly changes that from a dark moment to, I am going to win this thing and I'm going to beat this. I'm going to beat the capital city.
Right.
Right.
Like now it turned it from
That's,
being very personal to being external, right? Like she went from
yeah.
an very like I'm saving my sister to I'm done with
To,
this
I'm going to
game.
save the world. Like
Right.
she went from, I'm saving my sister to, I'm going to defy the capital and I'm going to save the world. I'm going to
Yeah.
change
I'm
this
going to
game
change this
because
game.
this game is BS.
Right.
And so when her and PETA stand there with the berries and they get stopped, right? Because they're not going to, there's no way that it's going to end that way because that destroys everything that the capital is after.
Right.
At that moment, we see that she's had victory not only for herself and for PETA, but for everyone. Even
Right.
those who have died in the games, there's still, at least they died now with a purpose,
Right.
right? And there's something going forward. So that's an example of that when the game cost her nearly everything.
Mm-hmm.
That's when it turned around for her,
Right.
right? That's when it changed. That's when things changed. And she made tremendous sacrifices already up to that
Mm-hmm.
point.
Yeah.
But that was the hardest one. So the point of all that, I guess, is that your story, there has to be escalation of the events. If it doesn't escalate, if your character doesn't pay more every single time they have some kind of a trial, then your story tends to fall flat. And this is, again, where that muddle in the middle comes from, is you want your character to complete the journey, but you don't want anything too bad to go wrong along the way.
Yeah. Just so
Well,
you know, I don't know if you guys have read
I-
if you've just seen the book or just seen the movie, you don't really see this actually happen. But in the book, Katniss loses her hearing from that explosion.
oh yeah,
So yeah, so she loses part of her one of her senses. Like so she like her I think I can't remember if it's a left or a right ear, but she loses her
I
hearing
think
in
it's
one of her ears.
left. I think I don't
And then
remember
PETA
exactly, and they
actually
don't.
loses
Yeah.
his leg. Like he
Hmm.
lost his leg. Like and they don't have that in the movie, but in the book he was like he lost his leg. They amputated his leg. So like there were some things that like people don't understand. Like the book was that's why I like to say the books are always better than the movies because you see more of that transformation. You feel it more because you
Hmm.
get that internal voice and everything. The other thing that you hit on earlier that I think that would be another good test is the theme depth
Oh
test. Like making sure that you have a thematic
yes.
depth in your story. And like you said, that theme can be stated or it can be understated, but it needs to be there and it needs to be bigger than the character. It's kind of like it could be their
Hmm.
it could be what drives them, it could be part of their motivation, but it's also something like so the way you get to that theme is like what is the story really about? Like just ask that general
Hmm.
story, like what question am I causing the reader to ask of themselves or about what their world is, you know?
Right.
So so if you want to know a red flag about this, you can know that your theme is more like a message instead of more of like
Right.
an introspective
Oh.
exploration. So
Hmm.
like you need to make sure that you're giving your readers a sense of how can this impact me, and that's how
Right.
you're doing that with a theme.
Right, exactly. Because my grandfather, who was a pastor, he used to say this is, and he would even say, like, if you have a story to tell, tell the story. If you have a sermon to preach, get a pulpit and preach the sermon. Right.
Mm-hmm.
The message is not the story. The message comes from the story, right?
Right.
And your theme and premise come from the story. So if your theme is simply climate change is coming and it's destroying the world, great theme, right? We all want to talk about climate change and how bad it is for the world, right? Except that you don't have something that's like affecting somebody personally, right?
Right.
So it doesn't, your story even though it might matter to change someone's mind about whether they should throw away their aluminum foil or whatever, recycle it or whatever the case may be, right? Like, but it doesn't impact them that way because there's nothing in it that
Do you want to
matters.
hear a really good example of this that actually didn't really hit me until just now? But it's one of my favorite like dumb movies, and that's Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, right?
Yes.
Bill and Ted's
There's
Excellent
another
Adventure.
one.
So,
I'll tell
yeah,
you in a
so
second.
you
Yeah.
think that it's just about these two dorks who get into a phone booth that can travel through time and they're putting together this report. But what the story is really about is how history can change. By learning history, we can change the world and be better people. And it's actually, that's what it's about, because while the what were they called, the something stallions, like their whole air
Yeah.
guitar thing, like that, really what it was is that this stemmed from this report. You guys, you created this. George Carlin said this is the
Yes.
pivotal point. You have to make this report has to work, because what it does is it changes the entire societal, it pivots society into creating this utopian society, and we all become a peaceful race. Because what he's saying is, because you came back and you figured out history, you became mindful of us as a people and how we grow and learn together. That's literally what that story is about. But it is so
Yep.
funny in the way its delivery is, that you, like, if you're just watching it passively and don't care, you may not pick up on that. But that's what that's about. So that's why that story endures, and it didn't just get like that's why people still talk about it, because
Hmm.
and they may not even realize that that's what the story is about, just because there's some great one-liners in there. But honestly, that's what you need to do with your story. You need to ask yourself, what is this really about? And some red flags, of course, is that, theme is the message, that you're just like, if they came out and if Bill and Ted said, listen, we figured this out. If we
Yeah.
if we study history, then we'll remember that as a society, history repeats itself, and we can actually be better people. And
Yeah.
like, if it was that obvious, then I think people would be like, oh, that was dumb,
Right.
right?
Exactly. Yeah. Because, well, and part of that is because people don't want to be preached to,
No, they don't.
right?
They
They
want to
don't.
see they want to see
Like
somebody go
what they
through a
want to see
journey.
is like somebody goes through a journey and then at the end of it, like, okay, one of my favorite movies, Crash, right?
Oh,
Four different stories, it all comes together at the end,
yeah.
right? But the story isn't about the story really is about that we all have biases, racial biases and personal biases, all of us,
Right.
and that those can impact our lives. But then you have this story, this multifaceted story of these two people, of these four people, and it all comes together at the end,
Yeah.
right? And you're like, oh my God, everybody in that story had a racial bias of one type or another.
Yeah.
And so if they had just come out and said, Crash, a story about racism, we would have all went, I am not seeing that, right? I am not renting it. I'm not going to the theater. I'm not watching that,
Right.
right? But they came out and said, this is a story, right? And they pitched this story to us, and we all went and watched it, and we went, oh. And at the end of it, everybody gets quiet because they're like, oh crap. What are
Yeah.
my biases? What do I have in my head?
Yeah.
Am I the gal who says Asians can't drive?
Mm.
Am I the guy who suspects the guy that got into the black kid that got into my car and I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
shoot him?
Mm-hmm.
Even though I saved somebody from that earlier in the day, like what are those lines, right? What
Mm-hmm.
lines won't your character cross? What
Yeah,
problems does that world present them? And what lines will they cross to get what they want or need?
exactly.
And then
That's
you
very
go,
good.
oh, because that's what's going to make the characters okay. So by the time you guys watch this, it'll already be over. But I have a thing tomorrow where I'm talking about setting and character in
Yeah,
our
I'm excited
webinar
about it.
and
Mm-hmm.
how setting impacts your characters. But notice the thing that we talk about is character, right?
Mm-hmm.
One of the central themes of that whole thing is the character, because the setting should impact them. Yes, the setting should have an impact on your story, but what is it impacting? It's
Right.
impacting your characters and their decisions, right? We're creating all of these things around story eventually are coming back to character, because there are plot driven stories that are mostly about events, but most often those are not the ones that we remember.
They're not the ones that
Right.
become, I mean, even Ferris
They're
Bueller Day Off, the reason we keep watching that over and over and over again is because there's a theme that is
Mhm.
understated that we can all feel connected to, right? That like life
Yeah.
is worth living. And
Life
he
is
even
short.
states it. Yeah, life is
Yeah.
short.
He states it in, I mean, and this is a thing, like there's a lot of us that we really want to hear that, because that's why books like 4,000 Weeks, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like that is a nonfiction book, but really it's a story that tells you that the average person gets 4,000 weeks in their life,
Yeah.
and weeks fly by, and you don't get down to the end of your life or the end of your year even and go, you know what I wish I'd done more of this year was argued with strangers on the internet on Facebook. That's what I wish I'd done more of. If I had another year to live, I could win that argument, right? You don't say, man, I wish I'd lived just a little longer. I could have finished that last season of Matlock. No, no, dude, no, right?
Hmm.
But yeah, I mean, and there's silly movies like, Dude, Where's My Car? I
Yeah,
mean,
dude.
that is another one I think is such a classic, hilarious comedy, but there's such great themes and undertones there. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like,
Yeah.
and there are movies that don't have that. Fast and Furious 10, because there was
Yeah.
way so much more story to tell. Give me a break, okay? But Hobbs and Shaw, I'm in.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean? Like, there's different stories like that that don't have that theme, that still turn into classics or whatever, that people, but there are, under most of the time, there are underlying themes, and there are characters that we remember, and there are things that we connect with that are
Hmm.
theme and premise related, right?
Right.
And those theme and premise are most often related to the character, not the world around us. When we start talking about Lord of the Rings, what do we talk about?
Oh yeah.
Frodo and Bilbo and Gandalf and Gollum,
Yeah.
and we start, and Smog, and we start mentioning characters.
Hmm.
Why? Because that's what sticks with us,
Because it's
right?
not about, oh well, there's this ring that needs to get across the like you don't
Right.
talk
I
about
mean, that is what it's about if we
it's what it's
break
about,
it
but it's
down,
not what it's about. It's
but it's
not what it's
not.
about. And that's
It's
why I
about the
think,
journey,
yeah,
you
and
know?
it's not just Frodo's journey, right? It's like all these characters have a journey.
Well, yeah, there is the
So
side journey with Tom, but could have skipped that token. Could have skipped it. But anyway,
anyway,
well, there.
okay, so my last test for making sure that your idea is viable, are you ready? You're going to be like, you've
Yes.
already kind of hit on it, is the endurance test. Can this
Oh, yeah.
idea, can the momentum go? Can it continue? Do I have to pad this idea? Like, can this be escalated? And can it be escalated in stages? Like, how is this idea? How are the stakes going to include and continue to escalate? Is there a midpoint, right? Like you have to have that midpoint so that the middle of that story
Hmm.
doesn't sag, like you said. And and also, does it naturally demand an ending? Does your story
Yes.
require that it ends, or can it keep
Oh,
going?
yes, because even with a series, your book needs to have a resolution for now,
Right.
at least a resolution for now, because we have to resolve at least one story, unless it's
Right.
a serial, which is a different type of fiction.
Hmm.
But even for a book series, especially a novel series, like people are not going to put up with a serial for a novel by novel length serials for very long. Novel length
No.
episodes are not going to, anyway,
No,
that's just
people
not
get
going to
bored with
work,
them. They
right?
well,
But
the other parts of those don't hold it out. Don't
yeah,
hold it.
other parts then don't hold all the way through. So you need to have a resolution at least of that book, because that's one of the things, like every single book has an event that starts things. So there's a situation. The situation is disrupted. That situation is the ordinary world. That situation is disrupted. problems happen. Those
Mhm.
problems escalate. There is a crisis. That is your climax. And then we have a resolution. Every single story, whether you use some kind of structure to establish that or not, but every single good story has all of those elements, right? It just has them. Just they're just natural parts of the story.
Mhm.
And the resolution is a really important part of that. So, like, can it come to a resolution? Is there a solution for this problem, or at least this part of this problem,
Right.
right? And if there's not, well, then maybe that's not, I mean, there's just, and we run into this a lot of times with memoir or with even with women's fiction or men's fiction that's more
That's
literary,
true. Yeah.
right? And what you have is you just have this series of events and this cool story. And yes, the character changes, but then they die or
Mhm.
whatever the case may be. And we come down to the end and there's no resolution.
Mhm.
One of my favorite movies that there's like a semi really rough resolution is the movie Doubt. Now,
Oh yeah.
super dark. Just let you know, like if you go find it, watch it. Super dark is a little bit old movie, right? But the solution at the resolution at the end is the nun who's just been so certain of everything throughout the entire movie ends the movie with, and now I have such doubt. I
Mm.
have so much doubt because now she's not certain that she was right anymore.
Yeah.
And it's like she went from someone who was very self righteous and very right about everything and had it all figured out to a crisis where she doesn't know anything. So the resolution is she doesn't get a resolution.
Yeah.
And she's the character we expected to have one, right? But that's the character arc that drives it and makes us all of us at the end of that movie go, oh man, I have so many doubts too,
Mhm.
right? And that's what it's supposed to do. But it
Mhm.
doesn't start that way. Like
Right. Well,
that's not how it's built.
you have to,
But
the journey is actually bringing everybody to that realization that that's where they're,
right.
right. Like that's that underlining tone theme thing that you're trying to
Hmm.
teach people.
Right.
Shyamalan, I mean, I know people give him a lot of a hard time, M. Night Shyamalan, but I will say, as much as imperfect as his stories are, they do. The reason that a lot of people like them, including me, is because I think people don't like them because they don't have those happy endings, those real solid resolutions like you talk about. They kind of like end on a weird like question. And
Hmm.
so like a good example of that is one of my favorites. It's called The Village, right? I don't know if anybody's seen that,
Oh,
but
yep, yep,
at
yep.
the end of The Village, like she gets out there and she gets the medicine that needs to save the boy and whatever, and she comes back home. The monsters are not resolved. The 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 kid that caused the problem in the first place is now dead and nobody knows that. She doesn't even know that. um there's still this issue of like their social structure and why that's kind of very very flawed and whether or not that's ever going to be resolved, but it doesn't matter because the story is resolved. She got the medicine and saved the person that she loved. The
Right.
end, right? That's the resolution. So Hunger Games is the same way. Like you get to the end of that story and she didn't solve the problem. There's still going to be a Hunger Games the next year. She also has this now like pivotal kind of like traumatic, she's trauma bonded to PETA, but she's still in love with Gail in a way, like she's
Right.
like she's torn between these two boys. And then she also understands and knows that like now she has to figure out how to like live in this trauma, right? And that she's
Right.
kind of gotten through. The resolution is she got home and she quote unquote saved her sister, but really did she? And so you walk away from that going, oh my gosh, like, so no, you
Right.
don't always have to wrap this is I
Well,
think I think this is a novice issue. Like I think this is kind of what I noticed with newbie authors is they want to tie a bow and wrap everything up at the end. And I guess what I'm trying to
or
say is that you don't have to.
they don't tie anything up at the end because they
Right.
want it to lead to a sequel.
Right.
They go to either extreme. But and here's so here's one of the things. It's like your book tackles one theme and one question at a time,
At a
kind
time.
of,
Right, right, right,
right?
right. Exactly.
So for the most part, like, so when you read Story Genius by Lisa Cron and you talk about what it is the character is dealing with one specific misbelief in the story, however long that story is. And at the end of it, they have resolved that misbelief. Now, the problem is all of us are a collection of misbeliefs.
Misbeliefs. Mm-hmm.
So generally, if we fix one area in our lives, that doesn't mean we're 100% fixed, because I've never met a perfect person.
Mm-mm.
It just doesn't happen, right? So we've all got things to work on, and so your character is working on something, right?
Right,
That's in their life, right? And so that thing is resolved, because I'm the same way. I like M. Night Shyamalan about half the time. And
right.
the thing about somebody like him who takes risks with story is that there are times when you're going to miss.
Yeah, exactly.
The more at bats you have, the more strikeouts you have.
Right.
That's just the way that it
It's just
works, right?
statistically,
It
that's
just
the way it works. Hmm.
statistically, especially if you're taking risks with stories where you're doing
Right,
things in an unconventional way.
right,
But you're right in that he resolves the one thing there that needs to be resolved. That's the theme of the story. That's the
right.
story. And that thing is resolved. So you have to resolve something, not everything, but you have to resolve something. You can certainly leave things open. Obviously, Hunger Games does the same thing. Twilight, not the best example, but did the
No,
same thing,
right,
right?
exactly.
Um, 50 Shades of Grey, not even an example, but they made sequels anyway. But okay,
So
that's
funny.
terrible. But anyway,
Oh,
but you know what I mean? Like, there has to be some kind of a resolution, and that's something that every story has.
right.
The monologue of Steve Martin in Planes, Trains, and Automobiles when he's yelling at John Candy and like,
Oh,
here's an
yeah.
idea. When you're telling these stories, have a point. It makes it so much more interesting for the listener. And I mean, honestly,
It's
it's
totally
true. Like,
true.
we all have that uncle that tells stories at Thanksgiving. There's no point to them, right? It's
Yeah.
like, what was that story even about? Like, it was nothing. Like, we didn't
Right,
need to hear that, right? But and so, as an author, your story needs to have a point, and then you need to resolve that point,
right,
right? And then
right.
you can move on to the next story, whatever you want to do.
So
But
yeah, so
yeah.
ultimately a viable story idea needs to one have an opening disruption, right? Like an opening,
Mhm.
like, oh, the world changed for this person. It needs to have a turning point and a midpoint, right? It needs to have those pivotal shifts in the character's thinking. And then it needs to have a decisive conclusion, right? It needs to have those
Mhm.
three different, like if you were going to break a story into very three basics, that's it.
Yeah.
So then my question to you, Troy, and we'll kind of finish up this video or this week with this, is that how then does someone take these things, that this idea that they've got, and say, okay, I've got these things kind of outlined. What do they do from that point? Like you said earlier, we were talking about another client's story, and we are talking about kind of like reverse engineering. How would an author take that idea and then put it into an outline or a practice that they, or kind of a situation where they can build from that and make sure that they stay on track? How do you make sure that they take these ideas and then kind of like, okay, let me make sure I actually have a story from this?
So it depends. This is kind of a wacky thing, but it depends on the type of planner and writer that you are. Because there's
Mhm.
people that just like to write into the dark by the seat of their pants. And when they figure out what their story is really about and how things should be arranged is in revision,
Right.
right? Later on. So they really don't they just start with the core of an idea and they just roll with it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then eventually the story and the characters come to them. And usually what that means is you've got a lot of revision, you've got a lot of editing to do. You got to decide where the story starts, because generally you didn't start it in the right
Yeah,
place when you were
I've
just
noticed
going
that
by
a
the seat of
lot
your
of times
pants.
people start
You
it
know,
way too early.
they either started too early or too late. And again, this just depends on your personality, like who you are. And
Hmm.
so it's like, they'll just start a story, and I'm like, who is this person? Where did they come from? Like, I don't know anything about this person. So I
Yeah.
didn't know anything about their ordinary world. They were just instant disruption. We have no idea what's going on.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
Um, or they start it way too early. My character was born in Tennessee in
Right.
1966. And like, who the hell cares? But anyway, so but the way you do it, it depends on your writer type. Like if you're a plotter, usually a lot of times you'll figure all this out at the beginning. You know, you'll be a
Hmm.
James Patterson, you write a 20,000 word outline and then write your book around that.
Right.
Right. Okay, wonderful, great, that's awesome. Some people figure it out like partway through, which
Right.
is generally what I do is I start with a couple ideas and things like that. I start right into it a little bit and then I go, okay, now I know what's going to happen. So I outline the rest. Right.
Hmm.
That's kind of the way it happens, not always, but sort of. Um, but and then there's people that'll just they write scenes because they've got these ideas of things that could happen in that book, and then they just pull them together later on. So it depends on your personality and your structure. The danger, there's a small danger of writing into the dark without at least having the idea of what your character's goals and motives are. And that is that you can get a good portion of the way into an idea and find out it's not enough of an idea to sustain a story
Right. And that
all the way.
happens. And that
Or
happens.
it's a different length than what you thought it was.
Right.
I started a short story the end of last year, and I thought it was a 5,000 word short story, and it's currently a 25,000 word novella, and I'm going to add another chapter during the revision process. Whoops. You know, right.
Yeah.
And stuff like that happens because the story ended up being more than I thought it was going to be.
Right.
Right. So sometimes that happens. That's okay. But you as an author need to just recognize it as it's happening. Right. And so
Hmm.
some of that is instinct, but some of it is just like if you can flesh out at least part of the idea beforehand and break it into some smaller ideas and maybe just some what I call tentpole events. If you can start with that as a discovery writer and have at least an idea of sort of where your character is going, so you're not just flying completely blind, then you can have a better idea of how long the story is going to be and what it matters, the reason that it matters, right? So if you have a
Right.
theme and a character, that's really what you need, absolutely. But the more that you know, the easier it's going to be to write the story in
Exactly.
a lot of cases. Or then you can just fix it in revision. That's fine. Doesn't really
Well,
matter.
yeah,
But
and that and
you know,
that's okay too. Like, we yeah, oh gosh, I've got this um like I very rarely have found a story where I'm like, oh my gosh, this is absolutely perfect. Like very
mm,
rarely. And I know if I've got a client right now that we're pretty dang close to good, perfect. Like he's done a good job, but I know that I'm not I'm late in the revision process. Like he's been through several beta readers. He's
mhm,
done several revisions. Like he's had it even, I think he's even had it edited because the dang thing is like near beautiful. I'm gonna do a
mhm,
copy edit on the thing and I'm excited about it because I I don't think there's gonna be like a significant amount of syntax and complex editing
right.
involved. Like it's really going to be more of a like just making sure that the word choices and the pacing is good. But it's really
Mhm,
good. Um, could Does that mean it's absolutely perfect? No. Like Troy says, you and I, we're probably really good critics. In fact, the last couple times I've gone to the movie, it's kind of I've it's really hard to turn off the editor, right? I
oh,
went to
I
go see
can't.
I went to the new Superman movie and I'm sitting there and I'm listening to Lex Luthor's like his monologue, his villain
Yeah.
monologue. And I'm like,
Well,
really?
Bob,
Yeah, I'm like, really,
what I
DC
was gonna
Comics?
do,
Like, why do we have a villain monologue?
wait though.
But it's a trope, right? Like it's part
It's
of
a trope, and the
it's
reason tropes are there is because they work.
right.
And
So it's one of
so,
those things, but it was funny to me because I'm like, oh, there it is, and then
oh
save
yeah.
save the cat, like literally save the cat was right. I'm like, save the dog. Like it was amazing. Like I was just sitting there
Hmm.
seeing all this, and so I couldn't keep my mouth shut. My daughter kept grabbing me, and she's like, "Mom, turn it off." And I'm like, I'm so sorry. But
No,
it's,
what you have to
but
learn
it's
is just to be
true.
quiet,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because my
But
problem is like most mysteries I'll go into and I'm like, I haven't figured out pretty early. It's
I can
rare when they
figure,
really
yeah.
surprise me, right?
Right.
And there's a lot of plots too that like I just haven't figured out. And that's okay because
Mm-hmm.
what I find is that, okay, so part of my thing about developing an innate sense of story
There you
is
go. Yeah.
studying stories. Well, because I've been studying stories and story structure intentionally for so long, I can't help but study stories. So
Right.
the story happens, and I'm like, "Yeah, I know what happens." And hey, so I can see these beats here, and oh, that's very clever. And how they did that thing is
Yeah.
really, well, nobody else in the theater wants to hear that. Nobody else cares
I know. And
about
I'm
it.
not
So
saying it
I
out
have
loud for
just
anybody
gotten to
but
that point where
myself.
most of the time I just shut up. Now, that did bite me because I went to see,
Was an
I can't remember
Oppenheimer. Please say it's not out
no,
because yeah, I know
no,
you
no.
hated that one.
Oppenheimer that's a whole different topic. That's an entire podcast all by itself about all the mistakes that thing made. But I went and saw this movie, and gosh, now I can't remember the name of it. But anyway, it was an Eastern movie, and it didn't do well in U.S. theaters. It did pretty
Right.
miserably in U.S. theaters, and the reason is it was an Eastern story structure where there's a lot less conflict because that's
Oh,
the style of stories that they tell. So I thought it was fascinating. You go see this story and analyze it, right? But I did not tell Holly that that's why I was going to see this movie. So third of the way through, she got a really nice nap during this movie because it was slow moving and very little conflict. But I found it fascinating because I'm sketching in my notebook. Oh, this is really fascinating, right? So obviously that movie was not fascinating to American audiences because people weren't going to study it except for
right.
me. But anyway,
Right.
so yeah, it's
I
just, oh,
might.
the creator. That's what it was called, the creator.
Oh, okay.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So
So
yeah, so
yeah.
I think the thing is that I think that I guess the moral of the story here is just making sure that like once you have a viable idea and you've tested it to make sure it's going to actually work for you. Like cuz that's one of Troy's favorite things to say is does it work? Like make it work, right? It has to work.
Hmm.
So if it looks like it's going to work, then yes, break it down and decide how you're going to write it. And then, like he said, creating those points of interest or like whatever. What did you call them? Like flag posts or whatever you call them?
Tentpole
Temples.
post,
Yeah. Like, so, like
tentpole
support
moments.
structure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So structure that like happens to kind of
Yeah,
hold the story up. Right.
very loose
Right.
structure,
You don't
but it
have to
holds your
be,
story
yeah,
up.
you don't have to be completely a plotter here. You could be a pantser. But what I'm saying is like, one of the things that I know always works is when I have a client that's like struggling with their story and they're like, this and this is going to happen, but I have no idea like how this is going to work. I always ask them this question: how does this end?
Hmm.
How is this going to end? Like, does this end good? Does this end bad? Like, where are you taking this character? And it's very much like having a destination for a journey that you're going to go on.
Hmm.
We just went to Disneyland. We didn't just say, okay, we're going to go on a drive and we'll see where we end up. We knew where we were going. And so I
Right.
mean, my husband's so anal that he knew which gas stations we were stopping at along the way so that we could get the best gas
Hmm.
prices and get and go as long as we could and all this stuff. So, my like that's just kind of like the way it was. So, you got to do that like Troy said, if you don't want to think about it as tent poles, think of it as gas stops. Like where
Right.
do you need to stop and refuel the story to keep the conflict
To make
going?
the journey going.
Right, to make the
Yeah,
journey go.
exactly.
So like that's what you need
Exactly.
to think about your book as. So like I think that what we should do at this point in this podcast today, and we're gonna do more plot, we're gonna do more story and craft podcasts this year. That's kind of my goal, is to not, we're gonna make it a healthy mix. But I think one of the things we should end today's with is our favorite sources of like help. And you did mention one of my favorites, which is Lisa Cron's A Story Genius.
Story genius.
It's one of my
Yes.
favorite story character character development books. And the reason is because, like you said, it helps you develop the backstory of your characters. And she does a really great job asking questions throughout that book that help you determine where the right place is to start your story, so that you're not
Right.
starting too late or too early. So I love that story. I think that's a really, or not that story, but that book, as far as a writing help is, I think it's a really good one. Do you have another favorite you want to mention?
Um, so I'll just say that, like, so I wrote a book actually on three act structure, but as far as structure wise is concerned, I always like to tell people to start with Save the Cat. Save
Save
the
the
Cat
Cat.
is a three act structure for one
Mm-hmm.
thing, but it has 15 very simple points. And the way it came about was an analysis of a whole bunch of successful stories. So
Scripts. Mm-hmm.
keep in mind that these scripts, well, and then Save the Cat writes a
Right.
novels,
Right.
were analyzed after the fact before Save the Cat existed. So it's not like these people went out, they used Save the Cat to write this story, and
Mm-mm.
then we went, ta-da, there it is. So while you should think about your story structure in a very loose way when you're writing the story, don't apply a specific model like Save the
Right.
Cat or three act structure or whatever until the revision process, because your story informs the structure. The structure does not control your story.
Oh,
That's
I like
really,
that.
really important.
Yeah, I like
Super
that.
important for you to understand. So those specific models should come in revision regardless of your writing, story writing type. Like, don't plan into Save the Cat, plan into a looser structure, write your story, and then determine
And
which
then
of those
determine,
structure models fits that.
right. That's a really
Save the
good
Cat is
point.
just a really good one to be familiar with. That
Yeah.
and three act structure are the ones that I tell you to be familiar with because they're very loose. They're very general, but they give you a general idea of where things go. You don't have to memorize either one of them. You don't have to have every one of those things in your brain the whole time, but they're both just really helpful
Yeah, yeah.
resources.
And one of the things that I mean I like to use is I'll free write in Word. Another good tool is Novelio. I know that you've worked with
Hmm.
Tara on developing that tool. As
Hmm.
far as a Scrivener is, of course, the old reliable. Everybody likes using Scrivener to write. Um, there are some other things that I've used to reverse engineer. I know one of them is Troy's favorite, Plotter. Um, I still use it to reverse engineer, but because I really like it. But as far as like building a story in it, I can see why it would be somewhat just it would be kind of hard. So I mean, it just depends on like what you're used to doing, what your level of
Yeah.
writing skill is, and what you. But one of the things that I loved, it was something that Troy said this year that kind of like made me sit back and chuckle, was that because Troy's like an innovator, right? Like he likes to come in and like he likes to find new tools and like what's going to make my life simpler, and he'll always like looking for the new exciting. He's like a new adopter, like he's an early adopter. He loves to early adopt, right? So he'll come in and he'll be like, let's try something new. And it was funny because last year I remember you had a moment where you're like, I'm done with this. I'm done with it. I'm just going back to the way I used to do this because it's just simple.
Hmm.
And you just said, I'm writing the way that I know works. And that you went
Yep.
back to your old tool. And I was like, it made me happy inside because I'm like, you know what? Sometimes that's what it takes. Sometimes we have to just kind of say, you know what, I tried this, it didn't work. It's okay. I'm scrapping it. I'm moving back to the way it works, or I'm going to try
Right.
something new because this is not working for me.
Well, just it's kind of like everything else. And I one of these next podcasts, I just want to do a thing about tool overwhelm, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
you get all these tools thrown at you and stuff like that, and some of them are really great and some of them are not.
Yeah.
And all of them are costing you money, and it's kind of an insanity thing. But one of the reasons I went back to Scribner was simply because it simplified what I was trying to do and it did everything I needed it to do. And I already had it, I already owned it,
Yeah.
right? And there's nothing new I have to buy, things like that, right? But the truth about all these different tools is the most important thing is that it works for you and it gives you the results because the tool isn't what's
Exactly.
important. The
It's
result
the
is what's
result.
important. Even
Exactly.
when I worked for Plotter, the one thing I would say is you can show me a beautiful Plotter file. You can show me a beautiful Novelio file. You can show me a beautiful outline in Scrivener. That is awesome. I love to see them. It kind of makes my heart happy in a little, just tiny little way, right? That you have this great plan. show me the first draft that you completed with that tool, and then I'm ecstatic.
Yeah,
Because the
exactly.
first draft is what matters. The only thing that we're trying to do is get you from idea to that first draft. That's what's important.
Yeah.
So slow down with the tool things and getting excited about certain tools or certain things. And I mean, and I don't hate Plotter. I think it's a great tool. Unfortunately, there were some things that happened around that I'm I'm just rapidly getting over them. Like I really just don't care about that whole thing anymore.
Uh-huh.
I'm not happy about how things were handled. But it wasn't my business. It should have been, but it wasn't my business. But anyway, so but all that being said, is it's still a great tool, and the for some people, but for some
Exactly.
people, it's just really confusing. I had a editing client come to me and say, "Hey, are you exclusively using Plotter? Because I just can't write in it. I love the education that you gave around it and around plot and stuff like that, but I can't use the program."
That's why I'm saying it's important to
You
understand
know,
and know and
so
do what works. What, use
do
what
what
works
works for you.
for
Use what
you.
tools work for you, and make the story work for you. But really, what matters is the results. So, really, when we do these craft sessions, really what I'm trying to do at this point is to get you from idea to starting the draft. And then as
Yeah,
we go forward, we'll talk about ways to finish
to
the
finish the
draft,
draft.
to make sure that you finish the draft. Because the most important thing in all of this, all the business things and all the stuff we talk about, is that you write a good book. But the first step is to write a book.
Yeah.
Whether you have to have a draft of the book, and then
Yeah.
you can make that draft good, and that's how you create a good book. But if you don't have a draft, like, you can approach us at editors when you have an idea. I'll be in LTE next month. Come approach me at LTE. Tell me about your idea. Awesome. Sweet. Don't come to me as an editor until you have it done.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because
You're
I
wasting
can't, as a
time and
coach,
money.
I can help you along the way, but until you're done, like as an editor, I really can't tell you how good or bad it is until it's done.
Yeah,
So finish
exactly.
that draft. Finishing that draft is the most important thing. But
I
anyway,
agree. I agree. And then finally, I think what we're going to do is we're going to plug Troy's little craft sessions monthly. Troy will be teaching these classes. So when this video drops, when this podcast drops, you're going to already miss January unless you're already registered. But February you are teaching another one. And do you already know
hmm
do you know the title of the second
yes,
one?
and
The February.
the one in February is talking about character and motivation.
Woohoo. Okay,
So
cool.
it's talking about mapping character arcs to plot arcs, but really what it is about character motivation and
Very
how that
cool.
impacts how your story develops, how your plot develops. Your character arc determines your plot arc.
And where
And
can
your
they go
plot
to
arc.
register? I'm going to put the link in the description, but where can they go to
It's on
register?
theplotabides.com, and
Okay.
each month has its own registration page. So I'll be sure to give that to you. And I need to make a page that just has all of them on there.
That's
But
what I did. Yeah.
I have
Yes.
not done that as of yet. That
But
is in the works.
yeah, so I
Mainly
did.
because I'm moving my plot, for all of you that don't know, I'm moving my Plot Dudes Guide to Story from one platform to another, and in that process I'm re-recording some of the videos, and so that process unfortunately takes a lot
It takes
longer
a
than I would like
longer.
it to. And so I you can actually register for that course now, but if you register for it now, what's happening is the lessons are being dropped to you,
Right, right.
right, as I get them done. So you get it at a lower price now, because once it's done, it'll just cost more. But
Yeah.
because you're being my guinea pigs and I love you so much, you can join for really cheap
Yeah.
right now. Um, but but yeah, anyway, but where was I going with that?
You were talking
Anyway.
about how you wish there was a page with all of your registration.
Yeah. So yeah, I
Yeah.
have to put a page with all of my registration things on there, but I'm also trying to finish this course at the same time. And I'm in the middle of editing two of my books that are finished, but I need to finish editing them
And where
before they're ready for prime
we're
time.
acquiring a
And
few books and you're running a Kickstarter.
yeah,
And you're
running a
like,
Kickstarter,
there's
acquiring a few books for a publisher. It's not like I'm doing
all that kind.
much.
It's like, yeah, we're
that
not
type of
busy.
thing. So no big
But yeah,
deal. But
no big
anyway,
deal.
so yeah.
But yeah.
Um,
And
so
if you're interested in the business side of things, February, I'm doing one on your brand, building your brand and your brand story and how that's incorporated into your business and as an author business. So I'm dropping that on February 19th, and you can register for that on my website as well as Print to Pro. I'm actually going to put Troy's story courses on or story webinars on my website as well. So if you don't go to Plot Abides, you can go to Print to Pro. I'm going to put those on there as
oh yeah.
well. So you're
Well,
going to be able to see those.
let me plug yours and mine at the same time with the same caveat of like these are not just free webinars that are designed to get you into taking my course or whatever that don't have
No,
any meat in them. Like
these are meaty.
these are full on meaty webinars. Even if you don't go deeper and take a course from me or whatever, I don't care. I'm offering these for free. Part of it is because I just like sharing with authors. And I went to Stacey's last one. It was amazing. You need to
Oh,
go
thank
to
you.
her things because it's giving you a lot of meat about running your business as a writer, which you need that combination of both.
Yeah.
So don't think these are like these just cutesy free webinars and the last third of it is buy my course because I'm so amazing. That's not what we're doing
That's not
here.
what we're doing.
So
But
yeah.
also, yeah, I mean, I was laughing. Somebody called me the other day and she's like, why are you not charging for these? People charge hundreds of dollars for these. And I'm like, no, because we
No.
have authors that need this information, and like that's not why I do what I do, and that's not why Troy does what he does. That's why Troy and I
Yeah.
are partnered
Yeah.
together, and that's why we do what we're doing together. So you're gonna get the information. That's why we do these podcasts. We're
Yeah.
giving you guys information that like we have to, usually these are stemming from like conversations that we're having with clients. This one probably stemmed
Mhm.
partly from an idea that we had last week, but also it was like further instigated by a manuscript that he and I are working on together right now. So, and a client that we're going to have a conversation with specifically about this
Mhm.
kind of stuff. So just know that we're not, we're hoping that this information is going to feed you throughout the year. So I hope that that's what this did for you. If you have any questions or you need any additional help, he and I are both available. You can find us at printpro.com or you can find us at the Plot Abides, and we're happy to help you get that coaching or that information. Even if it's not something that we can do for you, it's something we can at least point you in the right direction to get the right information.
For sure.
That's what we do. We want to empower authors to find their way in this what was the word my husband
Disabilitated? Is that what he
yeah, disabilitated word.
disabilitated? It's disabilitated
my
world.
my husband, I love him so much. We were sitting on a couch and we were like testing out the recliners, and I was telling him one of my biggest pet peeves right now is our couch is like, I like to recline, he likes to recline, and the recliners, the way they design these, couch recliners, is that you have this big gap in the middle between you, either a seat or a big,
Oh
console,
yeah.
and so you're not together. And when you're two people who have totally different interests and things that you're thinking and doing and watching, lately he's watching football and I'm watching true crime, and I don't want to hear his football and he doesn't want to hear my true crime, so I'm putting my earbuds in and he's sitting there watching football, but I still want to be next to the man. Like I still like
Yes.
literally want to be sitting next to him. If I want to lean on
Oh.
him, I want to lean on him. So it really drives me crazy. So that's like my biggest, I told him, I
Oh
said,
yeah.
either we're getting a couch where both of us get a recliner side by side, or we're getting divorced because we're going to have to sit across from each other. And I'm just going to have to be like, yeah, that's the man that I'm married to, but we don't have any connection because he's sitting over there. That's
No,
dramatic I've been
seriously.
being.
Oh man, Holly and I'll have to send you the picture of the one that we found because we were looking for the same thing for the same reason. All of them have a console in the middle. I don't want
Yeah.
a console in the middle.
Yeah.
And
Like I want to touch that
if there was
person.
if there was a console in the middle, Holly would crawl over it. She would be in my seat anyway. That there'd be an empty seat over there. There'd be an empty. That's not
Yeah.
even good.
It's not good. It's not good for marriages. Couch people, if you're designing couches out there, remember, some of us really like each other.
We actually want to be together.
We actually want to be together. My daughter, it was funny, she heard us, we were my husband and I love to just, like, it's our banter, right? So I was teasing him the other day, and my daughter says, Mom, have you not figured this out? Like, as you get older, you're supposed to like each other less. And I was like,
Nope.
Actually, that's not the way this is working.
Not
So sorry.
The way it's working
we
out.
liked each other before you kids came along. And now that you're gone, we're like, oh, yay. We get to just be us again.
Oh, yay. We get our time again. Yes, we had the grandkids over the other day, and it was such a pleasure when they went home. I mean, it was great to have them there, but I mean, you know, it was
But it's
great
like, it's so
because,
nice to go, bye, kids. Love you.
yeah, exactly. They got to go to bed early. The parents go with them. It's great.
Have a nice night.
Okay. Yeah, awesome stuff.
The joys of becoming an empty nester. Anyway,
Yes.
It's awesome. But yeah, hopefully this has helped you, and we hope you got a few giggles out of our weirdness. But we'll be seeing you guys next week. We hope that you guys keep writing, keep being weird, be kind, and read more books. We love you. We'll see you later.
Bye, everybody.